Immigrant justice groups and Japanese American community leaders are condemning the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act in deportation cases. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 was a wartime measure allowing non-citizens to be detained and deported during wartime without the due process protections outlined in U.S. immigration law. The act was last used during World War II by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to detain U.S. residents of Japanese, German, and Italian heritage. The president later expanded his wartime actions with Executive Order 9066 that led to the incarceration of more than 120,000 people of Japanese heritage, most who were American citizens.
It is nightmarish to think that it's happening again, that innocent people are being rounded up, indefinitely detained, without any of their constitutional rights being respected.
People in our country illegally.
President Trump is justifying the use of the Alien Enemies Act to target Venezuelan gang members, declaring that gangs are, quote, conducting irregular warfare against the United States. Joining us live now to take a deeper look at the Alien Enemies Act is Carl Takei, an attorney with the Asian Law Caucus and also program manager of the Community Safety Program. And we really appreciate your coming in to talk about this.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start off with this Alien Enemies Act. I mean, we're talking about 1798. So what was its original purpose?
It was, created during the founding of the United States, largely as a way to try and deal with some perceived fears that, the Federalists had. It's something that actually was barely ever used for most of the history of the United States, though. This is only the fourth time that it's ever been invoked in U.S. history, and the only time that it's ever been invoked outside a declared war.
And one of the things that we saw just now is that it was used during World War II. Talk about how it was used. What was the rationale for it?
The rationale was a racist rationale. It was directed against, Japanese Americans who were non-U.S. citizens living in the United States, immigrants like my great-grandfather who came here to build a better life and to pursue the American dream. But, during World War II and in the run-up to World War II, there was fear-mongering, targeting the Japanese American community, allegations that people were spies and saboteurs. All of this turned out to be false, and many of the military intelligence agencies knew it was false at the time that the act was invoked. But the government went ahead and granted these sweeping powers to federal agencies to round up these Japanese immigrants.
And it was Japanese immigrants as well as German and Italian immigrants. Were there deportations or were they confined here in the United States? What was the result of that?
Generally, it was confinement. There were Justice Department camps that were created that held Japanese, German, and Italian citizens who had been part of these roundups. And then that later led to the much bigger program of roundups and mass incarceration of the entire Japanese American community in the United States, including both citizens and non-citizens.
And you had mentioned your grandparents. I think we have some photos, too, of your grandfather actually served in the U.S. Army, in the military.
Yeah. He was drafted into the U.S. Army before Pearl Harbor, and then Pearl Harbor hit. And they actually, reclassified him as an enemy, even though he was part of the U.S. Army. Eventually, after the full incarceration program went through, he ended up serving. He served in the European theater in the 100th Battalion, and meanwhile, his wife, my grandmother, was held in a prison camp back in the United States.
And the U.S. government, we saw, later apologized and said that it was wrong. It was an infringement on civil liberties of this group, mostly American citizens. Now, with the Trump administration, they're saying that they are deporting non-citizens, that it is focused on, these groups of gang members. What is the difference, similarities, do you think, between what was happening then and what you're seeing happen now, or potentially happen?
Well, this is very much like what happened to the generation before my grandparents. That Issei generation, the generation that immigrated here to the United States, and that like they were targeted by the Alien Enemies Act. My great-grandfather was designated an enemy alien and sent off away from his family to a Justice Department internment camp. So what we're seeing now is very much like what happened at the beginning, after Pearl Harbor, before the mass incarceration began, except that it's not even in a declared war. And
it's the gang members that they're saying.
Well, it's Venezuelans who are asserted to be gang members. And one of the things about this is there's no due process at all. There are no hearings. There's no opportunity to see the evidence against you. People they just get a knock on the door and then they're spirited away. They're disappeared from their communities. And, there are plane loads of people who got sent to this Salvadoran prison on the basis of allegations that were never tested in any kind of court.
Through the judicial system.
That's right.
We so appreciate you joining us today. Tomorrow there is going to be a hearing about this in Washington, D.C., so we'll see where that comes and hope to continue the conversation as this moves forward. Carl Takei, who is with the Asian Law Caucus, we appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Download Fox Local for more videos on demand.